Hi, I'm Les Bridgman. I'm going through the Bible chapter by chapter, and I'm currently in the book of Genesis, chapter 10. This chapter begins with the sentence, "This is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons, who themselves had sons after the flood." The rest of the chapter is going to list the names of the sons of Japheth, Ham, and Shem. So basically, it's a genealogy, and many people skip over it because a list of names is quite boring. But actually, it's interesting if you think about it, if you think through the details of what the author is doing here. So let's get into it. The first point I want to make about this chapter is that it shows the fulfillment of God's blessing to Noah and his sons. In Genesis 9, verse 1, God said to Noah and his sons, after the flood, he said, "Be fruitful and increase in number and fill the earth." The very next chapter shows how Noah's sons were indeed fruitful and how their descendants did indeed fill the earth. So that's what the author is doing here. He is showing how God's blessing is fulfilled through Noah's sons. It lists 70 descendants in total. So we have 14 descendants named for Japheth, 30 descendants named for Ham, and 26 descendants named for Shem, for a total of 70. And many scholars believe this number 70 is symbolic for everyone, a representative number. The author is saying, I'm covering everyone. All of humanity is covered through these 70 distinct descendants. Also, many people believe that these descendants are each distinct nations with their own languages and territories, because at the end of each section here, each of the three sections, the author says something to this effect: by their clans and languages, in their territories and nations. So he's projecting forward to the point in time when these descendants become distinct nations with their own languages and their own territories. So this is showing God's fulfillment, the blessing of God fulfilled through Noah's sons. And if you think about it, this is quite interesting that when God made Adam and Eve in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, his plan, what he was envisioning, was a planet filled with human beings. He never wanted this to be a place for just two people. His plan in creating Adam and Eve was to have a planet filled with humans in all of our cultural variety. Paul says it this way in Acts 17. He says, "From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands." God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. So God's plan was to kind of split up humanity so that we're in our own territories, with our own languages, with our own cultures, and somehow this is going to help us seek God better than if we were just one homogeneous unit, if all of humanity was just a conglomerate unit in one place with one language. God is saying that that's not going to help you reach out for me as much as if you were split up, filling the planet and had variety. Somehow that variety, somehow those territories that we're in help us reach out for God, help us seek something bigger, something beyond ourselves. Imagine if humanity was all one big unit with one language. Would we have the desire to reach out for God, or would we feel like we were self-sufficient? So I think that's what Paul is saying here, and I think that's why God split up humanity in the way that he did. The second point, okay, so the first point is that it shows God's blessing is fulfilled to Noah and his sons, but the second point of this chapter is it shows, and this is related, that God is for us, not against us. God wants humans to flourish on this planet. He doesn't want to eliminate humans, reduce our numbers, harm us. He's not against us. God is for humans. He's for human flourishing. God is pro-human. So I think that's an important point to make. He's happy with the humans he made, and he wants us to be fruitful and multiply. The third point The Genesis narrative is historical in nature. I think that's what the author is saying here. We are 10 chapters into Genesis now, and we have already encountered 3 genealogies. In Genesis 4, we have the genealogy of Cain down to his 6th generation descendants, which are Jabal, Jubal, and Tubal-Cain. And then in Genesis 5, we have a genealogy of Adam down to Noah and his sons. And that genealogy goes through Seth. So from Adam to Seth, all the way down to Noah and his sons. And then we have a break in genealogies because we have the narratives of Genesis 6 through 9. And those give us 2 main stories of Noah and his sons, the flood story and the drunk and naked story that we encountered in our last video for Genesis chapter 9. And then the author, we're in Genesis 10 now, picks up the genealogies again. So we have this genealogy in Genesis 5, taking us all the way down to Noah and his sons, a break from the genealogy and 2 stories of Noah and his sons, and then we're picking up the genealogy again with Genesis chapter 10 giving us the descendants of Noah's sons. So the author is using genealogies to move the story forward chronologically. Number 2, genealogies connect us to the past and remind us that we didn't get here on our own. Maybe you've looked at your own family tree and you realized, wow, here are my ancestors. This is where I came from. So genealogies show the interconnectedness of humanity. They help us realize how connected we are and how we didn't get here on our own. We have all come from Adam and we have all come from Noah. This is what Genesis is saying. And I think number 3, genealogies help us remember God's promise to the human race that one of Eve's male descendants will crush the serpent's head. That promise was made in Genesis 3. And I think with these lists of descendants, these lists of sons, it's almost like there's a little hope. Is the next one going to be the serpent crusher? The one who outwitted us in the garden in Genesis chapter 3 will be defeated by one of Eve's descendants, one of her male descendants. The New Testament also starts with a genealogy, and that goes all the way from Abraham down to Jesus. And so genealogies are a very important part of the Bible, and they connect us to history. They remind us that the story is rooted in history. Number 4, genealogies enable the author to highlight certain individuals because he will pause his list and give more detail about certain people on the list. We saw this in chapter 5 with Enoch. The author paused and he gave us some more detail how Enoch walked with God and how he did not die. He was simply taken away. Well, in chapter 10, the author highlights certain people, and I think first of all, Nimrod is someone who is highlighted. Nimrod was a descendant of Ham. Ham had 4 sons, and they are named Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. And Cush was the father of Nimrod. So Nimrod is the grandson of Ham. And Nimrod was a mighty warrior, a mighty hunter, a builder of cities, and a king. It says this: the first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Uruk, Akkad, and Calneh in Shinar, or Babylonia. Then from there, he went up north to Assyria, where he built Nineveh, Rehoboth-ir, Calha, and Rezin. So Nimrod is highlighted for his political power and his military might. This was a powerful individual, and the author is giving us the detail about him. Number 2, Canaan is highlighted, but it's more Canaan's territory that's highlighted because it gives us a lot of detail about this. It says, later the Canaanite clans scattered and the borders of Canaan reached from Sidon toward Gerar as far as Gaza, and then toward Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Zeboim as far as Lasha. This is the most specific account of territory we're given in Genesis chapter 10. So the author wants us to know exactly the boundaries of Canaan's territory. Number 3, Eber is highlighted. It says Shem was the ancestor of all the sons of Eber, Shelah the father of Eber, and then it goes on and says 2 sons were born to Eber. So I think by repeating this name Eber, the author is saying this is an important individual. And this is one way that ancient authors emphasized a point. They didn't use underlining or all caps or bold their text. They repeated the word to show that this is really important. And many scholars think that the word Hebrew comes from the word Eber. So keep that in mind as you see that word Eber. And number 4, Peleg is noted here. Peleg was named division because in his time, the earth was divided. This is probably a reference to the confusion of languages that occurs in the next chapter, Genesis 11. Since the genealogy in Genesis 10 continues after Peleg, Genesis 11 is taking us back in time, kind of like a flashback movie, because Genesis 10 has already projected us forward past the time when the earth was divided. So I think these are some of the main points of Genesis chapter 10. And in our next video, we'll talk about the Tower of Babel. Thank you for watching.